Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of the Imperfect Men's Club podcast. My name is Mark Aylward, and I'm here as always with my good friend, colleague, and co-host Jim Gurley. And Jim came to the table with another self-hyphen topic for us today, and I think it's quite relevant. I think, Jim, I'll read it, but not right now. I'm going to
Mhm.
ask for your input after I finish my thought here. I think that the context of this primarily and maybe only, but is the state of men today. Jim's in his early 60s. I'm at 64, about to be 65. So we've kind of seen a few things in life, and we have the hindsight of looking back on during our life, what formed us as men, and during our lives, what are called kind of these moments of self-awakening. And that's the phrase for today, is self-awakening. And we're going to tell some stories about our own lives in regard to that. But I think, the book I'm writing and the work I'm doing and the discussions that Jim and I have, they all support men. And that's the intention anyway. And I think the reality is, if you look at the data, which I don't have at my fingertips, and nor do you, but the rates of men's condition, and I'm talking about negatively, I'm talking about depression and anxiety and suicide and addiction and broken relationships, they're skyrocketing. So relative to what they were when we were growing up. And there's reasons for that. And I think we've identified a couple of them. So I'm looking forward to an interesting conversation. But Jim, maybe you frame it in the context of our flywheel, as you always do, and then I'll read the definition of self-awakening that you found.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Mark, like you said, when we started this, now I'm going on 5 years now, um, we didn't know exactly what we were going to do, but we were clear on the mission. The mission was what you just spoke of a statistic that we came across about men, particularly in their 60s, committing suicide. And
Hmm.
then I think you did a deep dive and came back with some compelling numbers of the amount of men that were committing suicide, obviously related to depression, and but nobody was talking about it because really nobody cared.
Yeah.
At that time, they were more care. They cared more about yeah, African American men being killed by police officers, and
Hmm.
I think you
Hmm.
ran a comparison search or something, and it was
Yeah,
embarrassingly.
it was 2019, and it was an FBI statistic, and the number of black men that were shot by white police officers, I believe was the statistics, was, I think it was 7 or 8 that year. And the world was being told it was in the hundreds or thousands.
Mhm.
And yeah, and I think the number of
And
white
but
guys.
finish your remember we also at that time, or not that time, but a couple years later when we were doing the podcast, ran the numbers and found out there was thousands of men committing suicide in their
in,
60s as well.
thousands of them. And I think the most enlightening, if that's the right word, data was that the trend is going up.
Oh,
It's not a up and down. This year was bad, next year was better. It's up, 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 up.
yeah.
And I think it goes back to what we were talking about. It's one of the topics of my book, which is, how did this
Mhm.
happen? How did men get so maligned and accused of such toxicity all of a
Mhm.
sudden?
Yeah.
And I think that's an interesting story to look at, and it makes quite a good bit of sense when you follow it over the course of decades.
Uh-huh.
So,
But yeah, but today's episode, we're going to talk about self-awareness, and it's like a lot of terms, you don't think much about it until you do a search on it and it comes back. It's a broad term. We're going to go deep into it. It always fits into our framework of the Imperfect Men's Club. The imperfection is the perfection. And again, for those of you not familiar with our framework, it's these 5 areas of our lives that we talk about every episode. And in the center of these 5 episodes, if you look at it as a wheel on a spoke, um, is self-awareness, because it always comes back to self-awareness. So that's one of our missions at the Imperfect Men's Club podcast, is talk about as a man how important it is to be self-aware, because often we don't talk about these things, and that's why it's called the Imperfect. It's a club, right? And that's what we do every week.
mhm.
So of all the other topics, I'll go very quickly, but no particular order. Our profession, our life's work. So at one point, Mark, owned a company. So did I at one point, ran that for 2 or 3 decades. Um, so we're entrepreneurs, very different than say being a government employee, right?
Mhm.
It's a different path in life. At this stage, I would say our life work is what we're doing, right? And
Mhm.
particularly what you're doing is taking our life lived experiences and sharing it with not just middle-aged men, but men in general and women, which I find really benefit from this. So the other part of other 4 parts of our life, whether we're aware of it or not, is happening is a relationship with our ourselves, and that's our mental health and our physical health. So mental health is something we don't talk about, but super important, and of course related to your physical health of diet, exercise, all those important things. The other area is the relationship with others. We separated that to men, women, and yeah, you bet our relationship with our mothers, our sisters, our girlfriends, wives, whatever they are, plays out in our way if we're not self-aware with it. And then our relationship with the world, and that's our we subcategory is our heritage, the time, the place we grew up, our religious beliefs, and then probably most I guess significant at this stage when you're is politics, and that's the red team or the blue team. Even though this is not a political show, we aren't afraid to talk about our political positions,
Can't
particularly
get away
Mark.
from it. Can't get away from it.
Particularly Mark on the Mark claims to be on the red team. Not to claim to be, is on the red team. I like to think I'm on the purple team, but again, so there's a political part, and then a relationship being with money, and that's abundance and scarcity, and I think money is the scoreboard and the result. So, but self-awareness, yeah, let's get started. There's a lot to this one, Mark, but I think that in the pregame we're able to reflect on our lives, and there's these moments in our lives, often our lowest points in our lives, whether it's in our childhood, we talked about being the seventh grade experiences, but
Mhm.
also other times in our life that it's a low point and it's a painful point, but it's also what makes us human. And it's a quote, my favorite quote. In fact, we'll talk a lot about today. It's not what happens to you in life; it's how you respond. What happens to you in life that actually becomes your life.
Yeah,
And
it's I just want to make a small correction. I know that everything does start with self-awareness, but what we're talking about today is self-awakening. And so
yes, yeah,
so
that's the
this
topic today. Yeah, if you read the topic, you kick that off. Yeah, yeah, thanks.
yeah, I think it's important to note before I do that though that everything, to Jim's point, starts with self-awareness. I mean, if you're
Mhm,
not self-aware, these other gifts that life brings you
mhm.
might just pass you right by. I spent my whole career helping people find better work, and a lot of that is just paying attention to what's happening around you, which we
Mhm.
just don't do very well as human beings. That's been my experience. So I think a reminder of how important it is to be self-aware, and that is, looking inside, going, what am I doing? What's going on around me? Am I aware, or do I have my head in the sand? Because once you
Mhm.
focus on self-awareness, all these other things start to
Yeah,
pop up,
yeah.
if you
The
will.
libraries of self hyphen,
Yeah,
and
it just goes on. I think you got a
it's
list now. Your
endless.
list is closing in on 50 of them, I think.
I think so. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
And every time I say
self-awakening.
this is the best one, there's the next week. No, this is the best one.
The next best
It's
one.
kind of
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So, self-awakening, this is what you found when you did a Google search.
yeah.
Self-awakening is a profound shift in consciousness where an individual moves from living on autopilot, governed by social conditioning, ego, and habits, to a state of high awareness and intentionality. It's the moment you stop merely reacting to the world and start observing the mechanics of your own mind and spirit in a psychological sense. It's often described as the waking up of the observer within you. You begin to see your thoughts, biases, and emotions as things you have rather than things you are. That's an interesting
Wow, yeah,
little
yeah.
paragraph.
First thing that came to mind, Mark, is self awakening is not something you intentionally wake up one day. Hey, I'm gonna have a self awakening. It's really when life just slaps you right in the
I think it's both. I
punches you in
think,
the face. I
yeah, I
really
think,
think
yeah.
that, yeah, it's not something. That's what I liked about the description you wrote. You see, you get stuck in this, whether it's a corporate job or just even the environment you're living in, and you're just doing it and doing it and doing it. You forget, and then something happens that shakes it all up. And
Yeah. Yeah.
it's an event. That,
I think it's both. I think it can be a hardship or
Mhm.
adversity of some kind, or it can also be a significant success, like the birth of a child or a marriage, or but the
Yeah,
marriage can
I see your
also
point. Yeah.
turn into the divorce, which it did in my case. So those are double-edged swords sometimes. So I don't think it's always hardship, but it's always significant, right?
No,
Maybe
I'm glad you brought that up because, like you said, there's two different. There's a positive and a negative. I think for this episode, we're going to talk about the good that then eventually turned into bad, maybe because those are the ones where you're just blindsided and you come out a different. I wouldn't say a different person, but your whole perspective on life and your whole relationship with yourself and others is different,
I
and
think the
often that's a loss of something,
I think
a
that
loss of.
what I would encourage you to do and me to do is to not, we don't necessarily need to be chronological. We could start with one in the middle of our life and go back to our childhood and vice versa.
Yep.
But the thing, and I might as well begin because it just struck me as, I remember finding out that my girlfriend was pregnant when I was 26. I walked in to the home we were living in. It was a house she had purchased, and she was on the floor in the bedroom with a half-empty bottle of 151 rum, and she wasn't a drinker. And I'm like, oh, what the fuck is going on here? And she was petrified of telling me. And I didn't really, I can't say that I understood it at the time, but you talk about an awakening. I remember immediately thinking my life has just changed forever. And I didn't think that in a negative way. I thought I was, because all I really ever could tell you from a young age what I wanted to be was a father. I
Mm.
didn't necessarily want to go about it that way, but it was what it was. And I immediately woke up. I literally became a man right then and there in that moment. And I'll never forget it. I can
You see,
see it like it was
I didn't
yesterday.
realize that before you got married that your first daughter was um, conceived.
We
I
got
didn't know
married.
that.
Caroline was the ring bearer at our wedding. She was 3.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I didn't know
yeah.
that. Yeah.
It's funny that you didn't know that. We've been talking about stuff for 5 years,
Yeah,
and
I just the timeline. Like I said, I didn't know, but
it's not necessarily something I run around bragging about.
yeah. Well, what it is, I think what it explains though, I'll let you tell your story about how that marriage ends, but also how it began. Was not a traditional.
No, it
Um,
wasn't. But I mean, it was to me. I mean, Caroline was a miracle. She still is a miracle,
of course, yeah, I've met
and
her. She is.
it's not as uncommon as one might think. I mean, we do have a tendency. I do of thinking that everything's going to be all right and everything happens a certain way, and I think that goes back to that saying that's everyone uses. Man makes plans and God laughs. You know. So, but that was definitely an awakening for me in a
Mhm.
very positive way. And it could have been, I could have treated that as a hardship, but I never did,
Mhm.
and that goes back to what we talked about is all of this stuff is choices, right?
Yeah, yeah,
It's not what happens. It's how
yeah,
you
yeah.
handle what happens.
Yeah, like I'll share a couple stories too. This is just recent. It was actually just yesterday. Um, I saw this rugby video, and it was one of the short videos. It was actually the World Cup, which I was at in France a couple years ago. But it had all of the defeats, so it wasn't showing the highlights. It was a short video, and it had the pictures of the players that lost,
Hmm.
and it is so emotional, right? Especially after 80 minutes of playing like that, and it's the biggest game in the world. And so it just shows the defeat on their face of
Hmm.
losing. And these are, again, the best rugby players in the world. So I came across this video and I sent it to my son because I remember, or kind of forgot, like you said, it's the self awakenings that he must have been 10. That's right. It came up because he was at the Kentucky Derby, right, which was last weekend. Is that right?
Yes, yes, yeah.
Yeah, he was there. And so it reminded me because he was there, and then I took him to the horse races a few times when he was a kid, and every time he lost, he used to cry, which is really interesting because now he's a trader, so that's what he does for a living is bets basically every day. But I took him to that tournament, and he was very young. I was the This is in the Final Four. It was in Pittsburgh for the Division I national championship. It was the Final Four, and we we lose. I was the captain. It was also in rugby, they have what they call a yellow card.
Hmm.
In the 15, 20 seasons I played, I never received a yellow card. As the captain, um, I somehow got a yellow card, which means I had this one in the sin bin. So not only did we lose, but as the captain, I was in the sin bin for 10 minutes. And my son was there the whole time. He came with me on the trip. It's a whole weekend trip. And he reminded me that he came and sat in the sin bin with me. But it was at my lowest point because I took full responsibility, as the captain for that loss.
The
And
sin bin was the penalty box.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I got a penalty, but like I said I never received that penalty. I wasn't that it's just not it was kind of an awkward thing. The point is we lost and it was at the final four and I was devastated. Devastated. And I remember how such a little point and then but I forgot he experienced this whole thing, right?
Hmm.
And so we ended up losing by Austin, Texas in the it wasn't the final game, it was a semifinals, the final four. But the point was, as I sent a text to him, and he says, "Yeah, I remember." He says, "I also remember you that night. How you couldn't even drink a beer. You were just devastated." And remember,
Hmm.
he's only 10 years old. I'm,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the point is, it's not what happens to your life. It's how you respond. What happens to your life. It took 5 years later. We came back and won the national championship, Division One. Against Austin, Texas, the same team that
Mm.
we lost. So it wasn't the end of the story, but also it was just one of those moments where what are you going to do with this? Are you going
Yeah.
to stop and quit? And the other thing that was different, we'd been in the Final Four, a handful of times. We would won the national championship Division 2 years before, but I was determined to do it. So when we won it in 2007, I was the president of the club. I mean, I wasn't on the field, and I take as much. It was because you don't win just on the field, right? It was the whole
Right.
organization.
Right.
So even though it took 5 years later, so I think it's just an example of these moments in your life when you think this is really hard. What am I going to do with all this pain? And then,
Well, that's the thing, right? Not to cut you off, but I think that last line is the whole thing. It's like when we were talking in the pregame about this idea of self-awakening. I talk about in the career space and the men recovering from divorce space,
mhm,
this concept of are you paying attention
mhm,
in the course of your day, whether you're engaged with another human being or you're walking down the street or you're in a conversation in a meeting or a group or on a Zoom call. I think most of us, and I don't think this is a stretch, most of us aren't paying attention. Most of
mhm,
us are distracted in moments where you could miss an opportunity for mentorship or a new relationship or a new partnership or even a new partner if you're
mhm,
looking for one. And I think that in order to experience self-awakening, you have to do what you just went through with us on this audio right now, which is what am I going to do with this?
mhm,
Right. And I think that you kind of gloss over it because that's who you are. You're the
mhm,
guy that says, what am I going to do with this hardship? Not, oh shit, that
mhm.
oh, woe is me. You're not that
Yeah,
guy. I'm not that guy. And I think that's
yeah,
one of the keys to life is not being that guy because
yeah.
the shit's going to hit the fan. That's
Yeah.
no
No, Mark,
question about it.
I'm so glad you mentioned this. It's also something, and again, I want you to share your story as well. But it was also, I realized at that moment, we definitely had the talent on the field. We had the athletes to win that game,
Hmm.
to that match. But for a lot of the conditions, we didn't. And that's when I realized sometimes you have to change the environment. There were certain players on that field. I was one of them, actually. I couldn't get it done at that day. So it really was, what was I going to do this? And this is the hardest part about a self awakening is you realize you're going to have to make some hard decisions, get rid of some
Hmm.
people and put the right people in the right place. And that's uncomfortable. You have to change the environment. I had a high standard, right? I want a national championship is not easy to get, but that was our culture. That was important to me. And to make that happen 5 years later, I knew we had to make some significant changes where I hired to get the right people on the field at the right time. So I
Hmm.
appreciate you saying that. It's
Yeah.
not easy to do because you're going to lose some people, and and you're going to lose some friendships, and it's painful, but that's what it takes.
Yeah,
And
so I seem to recall you talking about the culture on your high school football team too, that the expectation was that you guys were not going to get beaten, that you were going to be champions. And that culture is,
it's a mentality. Yeah,
yeah, it's a mentality. I mean,
yeah.
it really is. And I didn't have that experience in all of my athletic endeavors. I did when I was younger,
Mhm.
and as I got older, the cultures were the challenge. And so I really appreciate that. The other thing, and I'm not going in any order here, but I just remembered this now.
Mhm.
I remember because it was one of the two times I saw my father tear up,
Mhm.
and I was teaching soccer on the summer of my senior year of high school, and I was waiting to hear from some colleges about acceptance. And my father pulled up on the curb during the middle of the day, and he was a pilot, so he was around a lot and gone a lot, but he was not a 9 to 5 guy. And I'm like, something's wrong.
Mhm.
And he walked all the way down the field to me, and he looked me right in the eyes, and he put his hands on my shoulders, and he goes, "You got in." I go, "What are you talking about?" He said, "You were accepted at Notre Dame."
Wow.
And he started crying. Like he didn't babble. Like he almost never cried. He's just
But he
not,
was that
not,
emotional about that.
he
Yeah.
was so, it was
Yeah.
so impactful to him. And
That's cool. Yeah.
you got the Catholic thing going on. He's a staunch Catholic. And there was a
Mhm.
lot of other things going on, just pride.
Yep.
And I'll never forget that. I'll never
Yeah.
forget that. That was definitely a self-awakening because my whole life changed. If
Yeah, like
I'd
you said,
gone,
it could be
yeah,
positive and it could be a negative, but
yeah,
it was also a
yeah,
milestone for him that he had raised a son that uh, that was qualified,
yeah.
and he also knew, the impact it would have on your life by being in that environment. And that's yeah,
And you know
it's
the irony, Jim? I had no appreciation for it at that moment at all.
yeah, yeah. It's like you said, it's pretty cool though. It's a huge accomplishment and this
It's a
milestones.
good story.
But yeah, but before we wrap up, we were also talking about these events, even in early lives. We talked about the seventh grade. I'll share my story real quick, and then I want you to share yours because I learned a lot from it too. There's these moments in your life, even in your childhood, particularly as a man, when you're early years, seventh grade. And again, I got a lot of stories in my seventh grade, but for some reason started thinking about all these stories. And one, the first, like the second day of school, I get into a fight. Again, it's a whole long story, but this guy made some comments about my father's
Mm.
uh, complexion or his face or something, and I ended up bloodying this kid up pretty bad, and it was going to get expelled. And anyway, this whole drama. Luckily, I had a teacher or a principal, and she let me go. But it was one of those self awakenings that happens, and then also just the discipline of having some really strong male figures as teachers
Hmm.
to learn the discipline of what how to act and what not to do. They back
Hmm.
then the PE teacher used to kick us with his foot, and
Yeah, yeah,
Mr. Green was his name, and he used to not what he would slap us in the head if you acted out of line. But
yeah,
and then I think I've shared with you too. One time I was talking in class, another teacher, athletic guy, grabbed my friend and I by our necks and threw us against the wall and says, "You don't speak to us. You don't speak in my classroom like that."
yeah.
That was just how they did it back then. And
Yep.
but I have to say, it shaped my life. The discipline that I needed at that stage was super important to get that. So there was a couple self awakenings at that age.
Well, it's also, and I told you a story about one of my teachers in this at the same time of life in the seventh
Yeah,
grade,
that's
just
what I was.
grabbing these two kids that were fighting in the hallway and picking them up by their shirts and slamming them against the locker and then dropping them on the ground, said, "Knock it the fuck off," and just walked away.
And like
I
you said,
think,
letting fights finish in school to settle things up.
you
How much
know,
has changed.
you never want anybody to get hurt, right?
Mhm.
But getting hurt makes you stronger.
It's
It's
self
just,
awakening,
yeah, I mean, it either is or it isn't, right? Because there's also
right?
guys that just keep fighting and keep
Yeah,
talking and they
good
end up
point. Good
getting
point.
expelled. Every one of these self-awakening things comes back to in that moment, you have a choice to make. Is this going to shape me or is this going to ruin me?
That's right.
Right.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so I think that, and we've got a little bit of time left. I think
yeah.
obviously, I was just thinking about when I exited my relationship with my mentor, Paul, who might actually be listening to this at some point.
Yeah, yeah. While you're
And
thinking
he,
about that, it's just another quote. I'll just share it in between. You're gathering your thoughts. There's these certain events in life that don't let them define you. Let them refine you.
yeah,
Right?
yeah,
Because
that's
it
good.
is define meaning it could define you in a negative way. But if you look at those moments in life as this is, I'm going to let this refine me,
Yeah,
not define me. Define
yep,
me in a negative way, but it's going to refine me to to pivot or to make it an adjustment to be better. It's kind of like the story I shared earlier. That pain was so painful to lose that Final Four match as the captain. What was I going to do with it? I didn't want it to define my 15 straight seasons of rugby for that 1 month. But yeah, so I just when you
yeah,
made
yeah.
me think of that. So
No, it was this moment in specific. I won't go into the amount of money because I think that's kind of gauche, but he stroked me a check when we sold the company, and it was the biggest check I'd ever seen in my life. It
yeah,
was life changing. And
that's cool.
I remember it like it was yesterday. I looked at it, and this overwhelming feeling of self-worth,
Mhm.
which is a little bit of a
Because you and
distraction.
Paul started the company, and this was the
He
payday
was
when you
the
sold it.
he financed everything, and he was the vast
Nice,
majority owner, but I had an equity piece of the company, and that
nice.
was
Yeah.
part of our deal. He was going to teach me how to build and sell a company, and he was going to allow me the equity participation. And it was,
Mhm.
most people I think go through life collecting a paycheck. And
Yeah.
I haven't collected a paycheck in a long time.
Mhm.
I collect invoices and
Yeah.
equity distributions and sale prices. And so it's a different
And
existence, but that,
rents.
yeah, and rent. Yeah. But it's a different existence. And I think that even though I don't want to be the guy that defines himself by how much money I made or make or what I do for a living. Matter of
Mhm.
fact, when we grew up, my father would tell us, I don't want you telling anybody what I do for a living. Matter of fact,
Mhm.
if they really push you, just tell them I work in the sewer. I'm a sanitation engineer.
Mhm.
He
Yeah.
just didn't want that attachment, but I don't want to distract. I think the other things, the birth of my kids. I mean, gosh, talk about an awakening, particularly
Mhm.
with the first one.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's when you don't have a
Mhm.
benchmark for
But
that.
back to the story with Paul, because I know Paul. It was a great guy. But the story when he received the check, what that was a self awakening. Is that what you're saying? Is that where
Oh,
you're
I
going with the
I,
story?
I had already decided that I probably was going to start my own company, and we had already broken ground on building $1 million home in Winter Park, Florida. And so I did it backwards. I broke ground on the $1 million home, and then I got the check shortly thereafter. But I
Uh-huh.
knew it was coming.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it was life changing. It was life changing for my family. It was life changing for me, and it was, most people have never seen a check of that size, nor
Yeah.
nor will they ever.
Yeah.
And
Especially at that time, right? It's worth a lot more than $1 million now.
yeah,
But that was you just remember that as one of those self awakening moments where.
oh yeah, life changing. Yeah, yeah. And I also remember feeling like I'm really good at this.
Mhm.
There was some validation to that.
Yeah.
Not that I walked around with a lot of self-doubt, I have as much
Uh-huh.
as anybody does, but I'm not a,
Yeah.
yeah, but,
Mark, I thought I would expect you to share your the difficulties of your divorce as the self awakening. And we got a couple minutes left, but I'd be interested in
yeah.
why. Uh,
Well, it's funny because I was working on my book yesterday, and
uh,
one of the scenes that I was describing
mhm.
is the serving her divorce papers, the day and the
Right.
time. I
But you
remember
shared with me that was one of your lowest points of your life, right?
it
Going
was
through
the
that.
worst thing I've ever had to do in my life.
Right.
And it was what was interesting about it, Jim, in the term of the self-awakening was this decision that I'm going to end what my life has looked like now for 15
Hmm.
years. That's all over right now. And I didn't, but at the same time, I had no idea what that meant.
Hmm.
So it was scary. It was sad.
Yeah.
It was scary, and it made me angry because
Hmm.
I felt like, and I feel like this to this day, I'm not angry about it anymore, but I still feel like she made me do this. I
Hmm.
had to do this for my children. And so I wasn't doing something I wanted to do. is something I was made to do. And I don't take away any responsibility that I have for what happened. Whatever was my responsibility was my responsibility. But it was a very emotional moment, and I describe it in detail in
Yeah.
the book. But that
Yeah,
was that was
it's just,
awakening.
again, back to the pregame. You also talked about where the relationship you're at now. Would you agree, or I don't know if you would disagree, that it took that self awakening to have the relationship you have now? It's that she came into your life because of what
Yeah,
you've been through. I do
yeah.
think that people come into our lives, particularly women, a companionship
Mhm.
at the right time. But the right time is you had to be in the right place. It's
Well,
not
that's
just
I'm glad you brought that up. So yeah, I'm 7 years into my current relationship, and I'm in madly in love, and everything's wonderful, and I'm very grateful and appreciative of that and of her. But yeah, my daughters actually came up to me. I hadn't dated in 10 years. I had
Mhm,
no intention of what's the word? I'm introducing
mhm,
another stranger into the lives of my children. And
mhm,
I made that decision. I stuck to it. And one day they came up to me and said, Dad, it's time.
mhm.
We want you to have somebody. And we sat down as a family and we filled out a profile online dating, and
Oh, is that right? I didn't know that till you
and
met
I
her. Yeah.
signed up for a year, and I only made one phone call, and that was to Shayla. And we met at a Starbucks. She was on the dating app, and her year was running out, and she's told me to this day, you were the last guy I was going to talk to, because
And
it's not
you were her last, but she was your first.
correct. So you talk about things happen for a
Yeah,
reason, you
yeah.
know?
Is that a coincidence or
No, but I also think, to your point, I was ready, because
yeah, yeah, it has a lot to do with that. Yes.
when my daughter said to me, it's
You weren't the
time.
same person that you were.
No, 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 no. I had some scars, but I didn't have any more open wounds, you know?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Like I said, life is timing. So, anyway, I'm glad you got that story in because I think that really speaks to these moments of self awakening, and then it's either the law of attraction or the universe or God, whatever you want to refer to,
Well,
that
I
aligns
think
us.
when
Yeah,
you put the right energy out there, you attract the
yeah,
right energy back. I
yes,
mean, it's
so
another way
true.
of saying the same thing, but I
And the
think
right people, right?
the
Yeah.
right people, the right opportunities, but you have to pay attention. You have to have kind
Mhm.
of your radar up. And I think,
Yeah,
especially with social media and AI now, we talked about that a little bit in the pregame, and we can
yeah.
conclude with this. Isolation is becoming a thing. And what
Mhm.
isolation does, among other things like depression and anxiety, is it puts your radar down, right?
Yeah.
And we're not paying attention to
Yeah, yeah,
things.
yeah.
And
That's gonna
it
be an episode for next week. I already know the name of it, so we'll save
sounds
that.
good. All
All
right,
right,
dude. Till next week.
all right, buddy.
See you.